everybody, it's Kim Kent here, and we are here for another episode of Kim's Corner. And I have the honor of being joined by Dr. Angela Watson from Johns Hopkins University Homeschool Hub. Dr. Watson, first, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, to speak with our audience. And one of my goals out of this interview was to give you an opportunity to tell your story. I think it's really important for all of you that are watching that we have an opportunity to see and hear from the mind and the heart of the Homeschool Hub. So with that, let's start.
Yay, thank you.
So, first of all, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, and we'll talk some more about that, but I would love for you to share with us the very beginnings, the birth of the Homeschool Hub.
So, the Homeschool Hub, so when I was in grad school, I did a little bit of research on homeschooling. Then as I progressed through my program, I continued to do work on homeschooling kind of in the background. And then I was hired on at Hopkins. We do broad range research. So we do everything from teacher quality to high quality instruction to student outcomes across all sectors of schooling. Then the COVID happened, right?
Yeah.
The pandemic happened.
Yes.
The pandemic pods started emerging. We all remember that. And we got a request from a state leadership organization asking for a brief on research on pandemic pods. Mm-hmm. And who knows what the latest research is on pandemic pods. I was like, guys, nobody does because pandemic pods are brand new.
Yeah.
But they knew I had research background in homeschooling, and so I got tapped then to write that report. And so we did the report. We talked about homeschooling, we talked about microschooling and how that related to pandemic pods, which was the hot topic of the time. That got picked up in popular media and a couple publications and was later turned into a book chapter. And so that was really the beginning of the attention for the homeschool work. I had been collecting state data on homeschooling, so you have to go state by state. Mm-hmm. I had been collecting that for quite some time, all the way through grad school, and had this database. Mm-hmm. And somebody was like, you really should make that available.
Yeah.
And why do more people not research homeschooling? Mm-hmm. Well, it's because they didn't have the data.
Right.
And so that really became the impetus then for the Homeschool Hub, was making this data publicly available and removing some of those barriers to research so that people could easily access it, other researchers, media, stakeholders, etc. So that's really how it started.
So it's really just the idea of just getting the numbers and getting them available.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
So let me ask you this, because I'm like kind of the outsider-ish looking in, and it seems like it's developed into so much more.
Right.
So tell us about that. How has it evolved
from
those very early beginning stages of when you first started?
Right. So we decided that what we needed was a page for each state, mm-hmm. and we were just going to do, the data was the original job, right? Then we thought, well, while we're at it, we might as well put all of the stuff in there about policy by state. Mm-hmm. What are the requirements for homeschooling? Mm-hmm. What do other sectors look like? Are there other choices for education, et cetera, right? And so we ended up creating a page for every state plus DC. Mm-hmm. And then we would start doing an additional page. We really should have something on there. We have one about military homeschooling, mm-hmm. gifted and talented or advanced learners in homeschooling. We hope to do one on special needs, etc. So we just started adding more and more pages as mm-hmm. people expressed interest, and as we saw need, for some of those topics to be covered, and it's really just grown. And honestly,
just the data.
Honestly, since it started, mm-hmm. we just run as fast as we can to try to keep up and get everything on there that we can as quickly as possible, because the demand has just been incredible.
That's great. That's great. I would like to ask you, what were some of as you're seeing this information come in, right? Were there things that you thought, you were going to see that maybe were confirmed? And maybe what were some of the surprises that came out of your research and the data that you've been collecting?
So one of the biggest surprises, I think, for me was the students with special needs. So I'm a little ashamed to admit, I didn't even consider that as a place to look. Mm-hmm. And when we were compiling the data and cataloging all of the policy information, mm-hmm. particularly around access, so like what services, what courses, etc., do homeschool students have access to in their mm-hmm. local public school systems, one of my colleagues that was helping me with that work was like, well, what about students with special needs? And she has a student with special needs in the public school system, and she's had difficulty finding appropriate therapies and services for him within those systems. And that was one of the reasons that she wouldn't homeschool, was because he needed all of these services, etc. And she was really the impetus for like looking in more deeply into special needs. And once my eyes kind of were open to that, then I really saw what was going on, and that we have huge concentrations of students identifying as having special needs in the homeschool population. So that was a surprise to me. The growth was a surprise. One of the biggest surprises, I think, we all saw it grow during the pandemic.
Sure.
The story at the time was that as soon as the pandemic kind of abated and everything went back to normal, right?
Whatever normal is, right.
That the numbers would go back down. Everybody thought they would go back down. I thought the numbers would go back down. The numbers didn't go back down.
That's right.
And so they went down a little, but then they rebounded back up again the next year. That was really surprising to me and to everyone else to see that happen as well.
That's beautiful. And now, one of the things I noticed, you and I connected over in New Orleans. You were talking also about the demographics. What are some of the things that you maybe went into this thinking, again, that the research either confirmed or maybe you had some surprises there?
Right. So there are a lot of really common stereotypes that are very, very persistent. People just will not let them go. And even though I was involved in the research, we have not looked very much into demographic characteristics because there isn't a lot of data. But we have had access to more and more data on demographic characteristics. And we've really seen them. What surprised me the most, I think, was how much the homeschool population looks like broader society.
Right.
Because I really believe the stereotypes as well, right? Until you really see it for yourself, and comparing it to the broader population. So even if I say to you, 62% of homeschoolers are white, right? That doesn't help you unless you know what percentage of the national population is identified as white, right? And so no one was really talking about it in those terms. So putting those two things next to each other so that you can see it was really enlightening for me, and I think it's something that's been really enlightening for other people to see as well.
I love it. So let me ask you this: what are some of the challenges that you faced, with the establishing of the Homeschool Hub and in being able to get the information? Yeah.
So, in general, studying anything that's not traditional education in a school of education is really difficult, right? Because most schools of education are in the job of training teachers that mostly are going to be hired in a traditional education system, right? And so, so that was a difficulty. I got some pushback from leaders on that. However, our dean has been very supportive of that. And so it really has been a great opportunity. Like, we just kind of have the perfect situation here for this to happen, and I didn't know that at the time, but as we were building it, it really became apparent that we had a really good situation for this work to even exist. And so, I think that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. So one of the things I would like to ask is, how can we, homeschoolers, because there will be some homeschoolers looking at this, how can we help you do what you do? Because one of the things that I really did, one of the outcomes I wanted with this interview was for people to really hear from you and hear your heart. Because I think there's a lot of misinformation going out about the Homeschool Hub, and one of my objectives is to dispel all of that, so that people that you're interviewing, people that you are wanting to get numbers from, will be more cooperative and be more willing to give you the information that you need. So how can we, who are in the homeschool community, and really some people who are even outside of the homeschool community, be of assistance to what you're doing?
You know, for a lot of what we have, we can get the data from surveys,
Okay.
from in those types of ways. The problem with the surveys is that they're nationally representative surveys. They come from a very small sample of the population, and then within that, homeschooling is such a small group of the
Right.
total population. The sample gets really small, and it's difficult to really find much out when you're trying to, you know, understand from 200 homeschoolers or 300 homeschoolers, right?
When there are thousands and thousands.
Yeah,
tens of thousands
and people do
millions,
all
right.
different kinds of things, right?
Sure.
So understanding that, I think too, like the feedback on some of the work that we're doing is helpful, so that we understand where we're missing the mark, because you know
You don't know.
we're humble about it. We don't know everything, and so like if people will let us know when we're missing the mark, also let us know what you want to know, right? So that it's a two-way street. But you may have great questions that we haven't even thought to ask. There are a lot of questions that we're asking now that even a year or two ago, no one even thought to ask. And so I think that has really moved the work forward.
So what are some of those questions?
Well, so like we always lumped in, how are you educating your child? Public, private, homeschool, right?
Right.
And then everybody that ever homeschooled was just in a homeschool bucket, but we didn't think to acknowledge that people homeschool for different lengths of time. The gender of the child, like those needs may be different, those outcomes could be different. What type of homeschooling they're doing, right? Are they homeschooling but they're also using a tutor, or they're part of a hybrid school, right? All of these kind of questions I think are really important information. So we've started including more of that in our work. It's just the nuance of just assuming, you know, the stereotype is that you just assume all homeschoolers are the same and they're all homeschooling for all years. That's not, it's not true. And so we have to like add that into our work.
Yeah. So how has some of your work been effective, or how do you think that it's going to be utilized in maybe dispelling some of these myths, in maybe creating programs, or maybe in terms of helping strengthen what's happening within homeschool communities? What are some of your dreams, for lack of a better word, for the use of your data?
Right. So we you know, we're seeing more and more homeschool research accepted to mainstream education conferences. So new audiences are hearing about this work. I think that's really important. We are starting to get work published. We have been able to bring in and kind of raise up researchers studying this in other institutions, right? So that everybody is kind of supporting, and we can amplify that work so that other people and collaborate, right? So we have more partners, and it's just becoming a bigger and bigger group of people doing the work, which is good. We have had some influence in policy lately with military families who are homeschooling, and there was a move towards making sure that military families were also being treated fairly and having their needs met as far as those who chose to homeschool. The percentage of families who homeschool in military families, military setting, is about double that of the traditional public. So really interesting stuff that we were able to have some influence on, you know, at least informing those discussions with some really interesting facts. And so I think that's something, you know, that's where we're really trying to sit, is just providing this information so that people can operate off of facts instead of these stereotypes.
Great. And you, from what I'm understanding and I've had an opportunity to participate in, you've established this community advisory panel. What do you see the role of that panel being in terms of what you're doing and even the future?
Right. So when we first opened the Homeschool Hub, we got quite a bit of pushback from the traditional homeschool community. That, you know, we were outside, whatever the case was. They were suspicious, they didn't know what we were doing, what our agenda was, whatever the case was. And so the community advisory panel is really an effort at transparency, right? To open the doors and welcome people in, and leaders in those communities, a variety of stakeholders throughout homeschooling, and really just say, look guys, here's what we're doing. Ask us whatever you want to ask. Here are our resources. Here are our people. And, you know, just have that transparency, and I think that will really help dispel a lot of these fears, because
Yeah.
people can see and they know and they understand, and opening a door towards communication.
Absolutely.
So that it's a two-way, like you can reach out to us and ask us questions, and that's okay. And we don't always have to agree on everything, and we're
Sure.
okay with that. That's okay,
Right.
you know? And we want to hear from people, especially if they think we're overstepping or we're doing something wrong. Maybe we are. And so like we would like to have that kind of communication and be receptive to some criticism. Like that's okay too. So yeah.
I love that. See, and if you're watching, I really hope that you see and you hear the heart behind this Homeschool Hub of collecting the information, getting the information out there, dispelling so many of the myths that are out there that surround homeschooling, and just really just having an opportunity to be in that national discussion is so important. So let me ask you this: what do you see the future looking like for the Homeschool Hub? Like if you were to look maybe 5 or 10 years out, right? What would you like to see happen within the context of what you're doing?
Yeah, that's something, that we have been trying to think about and what that looks like, because we have been we built it and then we've just been very reactive and trying to like keep up, right? And so to be a little bit more proactive and see what that looks like. But, we're trying to build an interactive database dashboard where we will store all of the data, and it's a little bit more user friendly. We do have the data up now, so people can go up and download things and use those things. That's fine. But this would be a little bit more user friendly, where you could say, type in that you want to know the homeschool policy requirements in Alabama, Arkansas, and Arizona, and it would populate that for you. Or you want to see the growth year over year in homeschooling in, some county in Alabama, and it would populate that for you. And so I think that would be a great resource to everyone, researchers, et cetera, et cetera. We hope that we can, get more publications and more awareness in the academia, and more research and funding for the research for homeschooling, and that it becomes more of an established and accepted sector of education. People spend millions and millions of dollars on researching charter schools, private schools, public schools. Nothing is dedicated to homeschool research, and so we're really trying to change that as well.
And I can tell you that as a homeschooler, I really, really appreciate all that you're doing. Because for so long, as a homeschooler, people really don't know who we are. They make assumptions of who we are. And so now to have the ability to say, well, wait a second, if you go take a look at us on the Homeschool Hub, you'll see that we are many different shapes, sizes, and colors. We're doing many different things. And again, when you talked about the neurodivergent kids and how they're being serviced, and they're being serviced in incredible numbers within the homeschool community. So let me ask you this as well, because you're doing a lot of the who are homeschoolers. What are your thoughts moving on into the idea of outcomes? Because I don't know how much information there is out there, but you would probably know more than I would. But can we talk about part of that?
So outcomes is difficult because we have to have the data, and we don't have that much data, right? So we do have some data on outcomes from nationally representative surveys. It's about adults who were homeschooled 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, telling us about their experiences. It's still valuable. It's really interesting.
Although it's really changed though.
It's really changed. That's the problem. So it tells us what the outcomes are for the people. It's really the outcome of homeschooling in 2000, 2010, right? Everything is really different now. And so it's still important information, but it's different, I think, than what we want to know about outcomes now. But in order to have outcome information, you have to have some sort of data. And right now, we just don't have that. So, we would be very interested in trying to figure out some way to stand up some sort of data, even if we could follow some students longitudinally over time or something like that. We could see the growth in students and be able to say something at least about those students, not necessarily about all homeschoolers. But there is potential, and I know it is kind of the next level of the work.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to give you an opportunity to address researchers. Let's start there. What would you like to say to other researchers who are just beginning to look at homeschooling, who are thinking, well, maybe do I do this, do I not? What would you like to say to them?
I think that before, and I really do take a fair amount of credit for this. I think before the Homeschool Hub and the research lab, homeschool research was not a respected field in academia. So it was very difficult to do the research. It was because your advisors, your departments, your whatever wouldn't respect it, wouldn't fund it, right? And so if we don't have funding, we can't do anything about it, no matter how much we want to study it.
Right.
You also can't get it published. You can't get accepted to conferences, and that's the currency in academia. That's how we get promoted and build our careers, right? And so now, because of the work we've been doing, I really believe that we have started convening groups of researchers. We've put together panels. We submit these panels to conferences, and they get accepted. And it's different now, right? And so I do have young researchers reaching out now, and they're like, is this something where I could actually get a job? I'm like, I really think that it is becoming a field where there are people who could specialize in homeschooling and make careers of it now, whereas before I don't think that was the case.
Yeah, I love it. And I also would love for you to speak to the homeschoolers that are out there who you're hoping to study, right? Who you're hoping to get this information from. Would you please, what would you like to say to them as well?
Yeah, I think just understanding what we're doing, who we are, what we're doing, and the door's open. People can ask questions. People are welcome to talk to us. We're pretty open books, and people reach out to us all the time, and so we respond to that. So we welcome that, and would look forward to working with them if they want to be involved in anything that we're doing.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, so you've heard it here. This field, and I think many of us would agree, homeschooling is not going anywhere. I think you had mentioned it earlier that there was this idea that once the pandemic was quote unquote over, everyone would go back. But what we're seeing is that's not the case, right? And so because this is going to be a continuing field where, homeschooling is always going to happen in some way, shape, or form, I would like to say to our audience, reach out. When you see in your inbox from whomever that there's a study happening about homeschoolers, recognize that that's your opportunity to have your voice be heard. So do participate. You can't do what you do unless you have the data. And so part of that, really, I would love for this to be a bridge to those communities where they can say yes, and we know that we can trust you with the data. We know that you're doing amazing things to help elevate homeschooling as a whole. I think that's an important message as well, that you're not here to poo-poo it, you're not here to, to destroy homeschooling. There's so many crazy myths out there, there's so much, crazy stuff that's going on the internet, but the truth of the matter is that your heart is to know and to understand. But for that to happen, you need a partnership. You need homeschoolers all over to respond when you send out these surveys, to respond when there's a call out there for we need to get homeschoolers who are neurodivergent. We need to get single family homeschoolers. We need to get homeschoolers that are in the Black, brown, and Hispanic communities. We need Asian homeschoolers. We have this. We want to study you to help you. So and to be a part of elevating what we do. So.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for I just want to thank you for what you are doing, because again, there's not enough research out there that speaks to who we are as a community, and the fact that Johns Hopkins University is really leading the way in this is significant, and that you are the face of this all the more. So I want to thank you. Thank you for being available. Thank you for being approachable. Thank you again for your heart behind the Homeschool Hub.
Thank you very much.
All right, so how can people reach out to you? Because that's the other thing, because it's one thing to interview you and have all this information, but if people want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of the Homeschool Hub?
So if you just Google Johns Hopkins Homeschool, it'll pop up, Johns Hopkins Homeschool Hub or Research Lab, and our contact information is on there, emails, all the things, so you just reach out anytime.
You heard it. All right. Thank you again for your
Thank
time.
you.
We're so grateful for you and look forward to the incredible work that is yet to come.
Great, thanks so
Thank
much.
you.